Welcome back to Conversations with the World's Most Interesting People. I am Noam Dromi. We're here at the 2010 Innovation in Humanity Summit at Chapman University, Leatherby Center. I am very fortunate to have with us a guest, Mr. Will Marre, the author of Save the World and Still Be Home for Dinner. Will, how are you? Thank you so much.
Great to be here.
A couple things to discuss. I want to first start talking about the fact your book has a fun and very provocative title, and I'd love for you to tell our audience a little bit about what it is about.
Well, first of all, I got the title from a client who's a woman who is running a very draining new company that was in the healthcare business. And I kept asking her, what is your dream? What would you really like to have happen with your life? And she was running to pick her children up from preschool. She was late for a meeting. She had to go back that night to the office for a meeting. She called me out of the blue because I'd been asking this question for weeks. And she said, I've got it. I've got my dream. It's to save the world and still be home for dinner.
Now, was she cooking dinner or someone else doing it?
I'm sure someone else was doing that.
So that's the title. Let's talk a little bit about the subject.
What happened is I started something 5 years ago called the American Dream Project, and it was to really find out from Americans what they consider the American dream in the 21st century. And because I was dealing a lot with, I would say, people under 50, mostly in their 30s and 20s, most of the answers I got was to really make a difference, to find meaning in my life, and then to have a kind of sustainable life, a sustainable economic life. But it wasn't all about materialism. That was the main thing. In the course of doing that, we did town hall meetings across the country. I found people, ordinary people, just like you and me, doing extraordinary things that you never heard about. So starting nonprofits or business that had huge social impacts, people who were earning good livings but doing exactly what they wanted to do and making a difference. So what I found is that there were some things in common that these people did. It's how they thought and what they did, and it led them to probably the most fulfilling lives of people that I've met anywhere. So I put that in a book, including the formula that seemed to work for them.
So we are at, as we've said, the Innovation and Humanity Summit. Now, obviously provocative concepts. And I think one of the interesting things in the context of what we've been hearing over the course of the day is how that applies to both the thinking of larger corporations as well as the entrepreneurs who are in the garage and young people who will one day be the business and thought leaders. What do innovation and humanity mean? Why are they important in the business climate and the nonprofit climate and just in our day-to-day lives?
Well, I think if we sort of look at enterprise in a different way, so we've had these categories before of for-profit, nonprofit, and government, all kinds of different categories. But really, if we look at what's needed in the world, is that we do need to save the world. What we're doing is unsustainable, so we're going to run out of everything. We're going to have 9 billion people on the planet. We'll have too many people starving, too many people unhealthy. The level of problems that we're facing is reaching a point called simultaneous complexity, which means there are too many things happening for human beings to solve at once. So now is the time to act.
So it is not too late.
Oh, I don't think it's too late, because I think the creativity and ingenuity of how we're going to go about things, I think we're going to solve the energy crisis. I think we're going to find ways, we already are finding ways to create abundance with far fewer resources, traditional resources. And the goal for humanity is sustainable abundance. And what that means is that every person would have the opportunity for a decent life without anybody really having to downsize to the point of going back to Little House on the Prairie.
Before our interview today, you and I were talking a little bit about kind of old media versus new media. New media itself, which is somewhat of a misleading term at this point. But in the concept and context of saving the world, I'm interested to get a little idea of your thoughts on how new media is actually helping. I think a recent example, Haiti, the fact that you can now text a donation really galvanized people to do so. But really, what are some interesting things you're seeing that are examples of that as well?
Well, I think there's two things. One we're seeing a lot of, and that's the democratization of thought leadership. So people who otherwise would not have a voice, would not have an audience, can over time build an audience. So for instance, when I write a blog, I have thousands of people read my blog. Well, I've spoken for many, many years, for decades. And during the course, a huge audience to speak from for a person like me is maybe 1,000 people. Often it's about 500. So you can just do the math. Even if you did that 100 times a year, you're not speaking to that many people.
Sure.
But every day from my home, I can either speak or write and reach thousands of people.
And do it in your pajamas.
And I can do it in my pajamas. And there are people all around the world at all levels of society, so they aren't just business audiences. So I think it's a revolution. I love that part of it. I think the second thing that's going to happen is that as people find other people who have their similar passions, thoughts, dreams, I think we're going to see movements take place much more quickly, positive movements I'm hoping for, where people get together and they create a shared space, and maybe they're not even close geographically, but they begin to do similar things, and then we get to best practices far more quickly. So things that benefit society are going to be implemented much more fast. What I like to say is grassroots movement is going to have very tall grass, which simply means that lots of people on their own can do many good things much faster than ever before.
As we begin a new decade and certainly have seen some significant changes in politics, in religion and science and in all other areas, the new year is always a time in which we can talk about the what-ifs. So a year from now, what will people have been speaking about in the context of what 2010 represented? And for that matter, how about the next 5 years? How about the next 10 years? I realize for our momentary role as futurists, what are some of the things that we're going to start to see that are critical for us to really be sustainable long term?
Well, I'm working on an article right now called Zombie Nation. And what it's about is when I go out to businesses in particular, from the top to the bottom, that is from the CEO to the frontline worker, people are petrified because of economic uncertainty. We feel very dependent, of course, to pay our bills based on our jobs. And really for the first time in history, on a mass basis, people feel they have no control over whether they're going to have a job because they can show up, they can be loyal, they can be creative, they can be high-performing, and suddenly that whole department is eliminated. It had nothing to do with your individual performance. So the uncertainty, the fear, the powerlessness of that feeling is palpable in the marketplace. And what happens is when you feel powerless, you lose your creativity, you lose your energy, you lose your commitment. Now, on the other side of that, how we're going to get out of that is to understand that your job is not your career. Your career is trying to accomplish the goals that are meaningful to you by becoming an expert at something that really matters to you, that you're passionate about. So you're going to have many jobs, and you may have several careers, but you are, we're all entrepreneurs, so hence innovation and humanity. What's relevant today, what the question that people are asking today is, what are you doing to make tomorrow better, either for the environment or humanity, in some way that matters, some way that's relevant. And if you have the answer to that and say, this is how I'm going to contribute, and you become great at it, then the world needs you. If you're generic, you're going to be replaced.
Well, before we let you go, tell us websites that people can find out about you, your books, your blog, things of that nature.
Well, Save the World, and it's savetheworldbook.com. That's where you find out about the book. You can visit me at realleadershipalliance.com.
And are you of the Twitter and Facebook?
I have Twitter and Facebook. I do all those painful things.
Excellent. So we'll find out all about you there. You've been watching another installment of MIPTALK, Conversations with the World's Most Interesting People. Our guest has been Will Marre, author of the book, Save the World and Still Be Home for Dinner. For more information on this podcast and everything else going on at the Center for Innovation in Humanity and the 2010 Summit, visit www.miptalk.com.